Hello and welcome back to audio. It is a lovely Friday evening and I am so happy to be doing this next episode. I wanted to talk about forgiveness today. I actually put out a poll on my Facebook to find out where a lot of people are coming from when it's hard for them to forgive. And 80% of those who answered admitted that they struggle with stubbornness in it, being able to let it go. And I have to admit that that's a place where I struggle too. And as soon as I started putting my little notes together for this podcast, I stumbled upon a reason to have to figure out whether or not I was going to forgive somebody else for something. And that was actually kind of unexpected, but I'm glad that it happened because it gave me a good opportunity to search myself before I started talking to you guys about my perspective on forgiveness. Now, to be clear, where I come from in the subject of forgiveness it's my personal experience. It's about, growing up and suffering through things at the hands of other people and having to figure out what to do with that hurt. I think that once I started really thinking about it and really going through it, there were questions that popped up in my head, like, do they know just how bad that hurt me? Do they know the impact that their words have had on me emotionally or mentally and spiritually? Do they know how ugly the scars are, on my body and in my heart? Do they know how hard it was to stop crying and stand up so that I could face it, work out my own salvation with fear and trembling, and find a way to learn how to offer grace, to forgive, to learn, and to move on? Do they know just how hard it is? And if they know how hard that is on me or on you, do they even care? And why should we forgive any of it? Why should they be allowed to get away with what they've done? Why should I let them get away with what they've done? And the more that I am in my feelings about whatever the offense was, the harder it is for me to ask a more important question, which is, if I could see them through the eyes of the same one who made me, what would I see? Would I see scars as big as mine, maybe bigger? Would I see a heart that's just as broken as mine? Would I see scars as big, as ugly and twisted as mine? Would I see strongholds as hard and heavy and locked up as mine have been? I've learned that it has to have a bearing in my decision on what I choose to do about the things that have happened to me, about how I work through it, about how I address it, whether I address it with the other person or not. When I look at the other person, when I look at them from their perspective, when I step outside of my feelings, when I get over myself for a minute, I have to understand that I am looking at another person who has gone through their own struggles, completely separate from mine, who have, who have been hurt, who have been disappointed, who have been lied to, who have been betrayed. And depending on how they've dealt with it, there's a good chance that the things that they have done to me is basically a manifestation of the things that have happened to them in their past, or maybe even in their current situation. And I know that everybody doesn't think that way. And I know that it's actually pretty hard to think that way when you're hurt, when your sanity is actually compromised by how you're feeling. How I feel does not matter as much as the actual reality. I know that my feelings are important, and I know that, they bear consideration, but I really have to think about my feelings and the feelings of the other person, even though they really, really upset me. But what matters to me is how well I understand what I see when I choose to look beyond my tears and really see other people. Luke 4:18 says, and this is Jesus speaking, he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed." Now, he's not talking about mere surface issues here. This poor that he's speaking about, preaching the gospel to the poor, the good news, the poor, he's talking about the poor in spirit. He's talking about the lowly of heart. People that have just been dragged through the mud, shot through the grease, and it has left them a shell of who they would be otherwise. The blind. He's not talking about just people who were born not being able to see, or through some medical mishap they can no longer use their physical eyes. He's talking about those of us who have a hard time seeing past or through the veil, seeing past our circumstances, seeing past the ugliness of this world, and actually being able to see truth, goodness, love, the real things that exist for us to enjoy this life. The brokenhearted, that speaks for itself. To proclaim liberty to the captives. Strongholds. We're talking about generational strongholds. We're talking about strongholds that have us bound, whether it's a new thing or whether it's an old thing that's just been passed down from one generation to the other. We've all got them, and you can't tell me that you don't. So I think that when we're talking about forgiveness, first of all, when I do something wrong to someone, I have a conscience. I know whether or not what I've done is right or wrong. And if it is wrong, even if I feel justified at the time, the point is that it's wrong. And I have to give an account for that. And that's something that I don't want dragging around behind me for the rest of my life. So I have to get to the point to where I can ask that other person for forgiveness. If I know that I've done something wrong, it's my responsibility to do that. But what happens if I don't know that I've done something wrong, or I don't understand it as wrong, or I don't feel that it was wrong, but you're hurt? Do you come to me and tell me that what I've done has hurt you, or has upset you, or made you angry? Absolutely. I'm a grown woman. You probably should do that. I would prefer to have that conversation with you than to have you sitting around with animosity against me and my not even knowing it. That's the grown-up thing to do. Now, it works both ways. If I have a grievance against you, my job is to come to you and say something to you, have a conversation, if at all possible, and work it out the best way that we can. Because from what I understand, God is wanting relationships with us individually, but he is actually very adamant about the relationships that he wants us to have with one another. God doesn't want us in constant discord with one another. In Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 and 13, we're asked to put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, and long-suffering as characteristics of living for Christ. That if any of us have a complaint against another person, we must forgive them as Christ has forgiven us. Even if it's not possible for me to come to you or for you to come to me to settle this thing, our jobs are to figure out a way, think through it, journal through it, pray through it, figure out a way to forgive and let it go, not to carry it around. Now, something that I found very interesting when I was actually, reading about forgiveness and talking to other people is that the passage that I just read in Colossians, it applies to the treatment of one another within a Christian community. But Jesus was dead serious, though, when he also said for us to love our neighbors as ourselves and to even love our enemies. Now, I am aware that a lot of the people that might hear my podcast or watch my videos are not Christian. And that's okay with me. I don't have a problem with that. As a matter of fact, I look forward to hearing from you whenever you decide you have a question or you want to talk it out or you want to disagree with me. It doesn't matter. Because as a Christian, and I think even before I decided that I wanted to live for Christ, I've always had a big heart for people, and I always want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I have a pocket full of chances in a lot of cases when people thought that I shouldn't have. But in Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 and 46, it says, you've heard it said, you should love your enemy, you should love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Which we all know that that's kind of a common thread. You love the people who say that they love you, but we can all be very easy to mistreat people who don't agree with us or aren't into the same things that we're into or, that we just don't like. But this passage goes on to say, but I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and he sends rain on the just and on the unjust. So grace and mercy aren't just for you and I, Christians. Grace and mercy belongs to whoever God extends that grace and mercy to. If we just love the people that say that they love us, if we only love our mom and our friends and our dad and our siblings, if we only love the people that are nice to us, what good does that do? What have you gained? What have you worked for? Nothing. Even in our hurt, it is so very important for us to always be in the process of loving one another in the same way that we want others to love us. If it is important to you that you are treated fairly, then by all means, treat fairly. If it's important to you that a person is patient with you, then by all means, be patient. If it's important to you that when you have done something wrong, you are forgiven, then by all means, forgive. So when I was putting this together, I like to sit and write out what I'm going to say ahead of time. You probably see the reflection of my computer screen in my glasses. But a lot of other times, it just kind of blurts out and I have to find some paper really quick. But this is the last little spiel that I have for this podcast here. For us to let the depressing, nasty, ridiculous, unnecessary to your life beast go. Let it go. What comes out of somebody else's mouth or what's done by someone else's hands is not your problem in the long run. Get rid of it and stop letting it occupy a whole lot of space in your head, in your heart, and in your spirit that could be used for something else, like growing up, like learning, like lifting someone else up, like encouraging another brother or sister in Christ by being kind to someone else. You could be doing so much more with the space that's being occupied by unforgiveness. When you let hurt and pain and anger go, when you let them go, you actually sever the tie between yourself and what the offense was supposed to do, which was to hurt you, to corrupt you, to cripple you, blind you, and even stop you. To cut you off at the knees while you're on your way to something possibly great. Forgiveness through Christ is part of the way, is part of your way in to heaven. But forgiving others is your way out of spiritual, emotional, and mental traps. It's your way out of bitterness. It's your way out of later on making someone else pay for somebody else's transgressions. It's your way out of shoveling somebody else's crap over onto somebody else's lawn. So forgive it and let God handle that other person about it. Because in the end, when you're standing in judgment, God is not going to be there petting you and going, oh, woo, 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 about some offense that someone else did to hurt you that you had trouble letting go. He's going to be very, very curious as to why you never forgave it. True story. And I'm sticking to it. So thanks again for tuning in to another episode of audio. It's a little longer than usual, so if I have to apologize, please forgive me. I'm sorry. But otherwise, though, I am so thankful for all of the support that I've been getting so far for this podcast and for my videos, for all the media. Check me out at www.engagingadi-o.com. That's awesome. So that's engagingadi-oh.com. And get a look around. There's blogs, there's videos, there's a lot of written content. Enjoy yourself and let me know what you think. Otherwise, you guys, I wish you all the happiness and love in Christ and with one another. Y'all have a good night.